the obstacle is the way, right? Rather than just seeing that health problem, I was like, oh man, that's gonna like wreck my life. That's gonna be a huge burden. It's like, no, that's the way that I should be going because that's where the glory is. That's where freedom is, and that's where I can give back, right? Be a positive force in the world.
Welcome back to the Rory Bland Show. Episode 2, we are talking with the man, Byron. He is a legend. He is special. Everyone in here is a legend and special, but he is no exception. He came over from the US to New Zealand and he started building a food forest in his parents' backyard, and it is absolutely flourishing. And his Instagram is blowing up, his YouTube is blowing up because of his passion for regenerative agriculture, farming through Syntropic Agroforestry. But initially when I brought him on, I wanted to talk mainly about food forests and all those sorts of things. But then we started to talk more about philosophy and different other areas of life, and this kind of bromance started, and now he's become a really good mate of mine from the inception of this podcast. So yeah, I really dig the guy. He's an awesome lad doing awesome stuff, and I can't wait for you to listen to this episode. We talk about his experience with food forest, what got him into it, his philosophies around life, some really interesting nuggets. It made me, after the interview, just question certain aspects of my life and lean into them. And it's very interesting watching and editing this podcast, almost 2 months later after filming it. And there are things that we talked about and started to unfold in my life as a result of that. So yeah, I gained a lot out of listening to it or like having the chat with him. So no doubt that you will gain a lot out of it too. So enjoy the chat with Byron. And what I'll mention as well is he rebranded his channel on here from Byron from New Zealand. He'll mention that, but now it's Byron Grows. So that's who he is. But I've left everything else in there just because, it's too hard to kind of edit those weird little bits out. Anyway, welcome to Byron's interview. G'day guys, welcome. Today we've got Byron and he is doing some really cool stuff and I'm obsessed with what he's up to and I'm so excited to share his world, right? So before we jump into that, who is Byron? What are you about? What are you doing, man? And then we'll jump into it.
Like you said, Rory, I'm Byron. I live in New Zealand, although I'm not from here. I'm from the United States. And I've only lived here for a few years, but recently have kind of fallen down the rabbit hole of food forests and specifically syntropic agroforestry and creating content around that. And that's kind of what I've been able to dedicate myself to. And now my whole life revolves around just growing cool food forests and kind of doing my best to inspire and motivate other people to do something similar.
That's so awesome. I say what you're doing is God's work. Like, we're going to dive into so many things. I'm going to ask you a million questions, but the soil and regenerating the earth, I think, should be one of the most important topics. This stuff should be blasted on the media and talked about every single day until we resolve this as a planet. Like, I think it's one of the most important topics, but it's not getting as much airtime as it deserves. And that's one of the many reasons I wanted to get you on to talk about this, because it's so important. But before we dive into all that, like, what is syntropic agroforestry? Because it's different to just having a food forest with lots of yummy trees, right?
Yeah, I'll do a really quick basic explanation of
Yeah.
the difference between syntropic agroforestry versus kind of like traditional food forests. When you think of a traditional food forest, you kind of just think of some fruit trees and maybe some berries and some perennial vegetables and just a combination of a few different kinds of fruit trees and things. Whereas syntropic agroforestry is really the emphasis is on ecological succession. Ecological succession is that thing that basically happens everywhere on the planet. It's what heals landscapes. It's what takes a landslide, for example, from fresh soil. Fast forward 60 years, boom, you have a forest again. It's that process, that ecological succession, but it's edible. All right, so you're replacing all those early succession, those mid succession, and those long-term successional species with edible trees. So basically, it's recreating restoration ecology with edible species, whether it's for commercial viability like a farm, or whether it's in a backyard. You can really apply syntropic agroforestry to any context.
Awesome. Where did it come from? Because a lot of, like, I've done a bit of research going to this. I've been geeking out on it myself. But where did syntropic agroforestry like come from? And then I think we'll kind of like dive into some other stuff from there as well.
It's such an interesting topic. Where does something come from? Because it's like, are there any original ideas? Like even the idea that permaculture is just kind of repackaged indigenous knowledge. Like there's some truth to that, but the idea that syntropic agroforestry, it kind of came from this guy in the 70s in Brazil named Ernst, and essentially he was kind of looking at the processes that people were using to farm and realizing, hey, that's kind of working against nature. It's working against the natural world. What if we kind of shift 180 degrees and work with that ecological succession, that successional process? And the really quick and short of it is, how do we create nice, rich soil conditions? You just layer organic material down, or instead of importing and bringing in compost, which can be expensive, or bringing in wood chips, why don't we just grow the species that would do that naturally and then manage them in a way to build soil, naturally increase production of things? And basically it's just this whole ecological approach rather than inputs based.
Yeah, and it's profound too. Like I've seen a lot of videos and read a lot of blogs on how when people do this model of, like, it's a model of regenerative agriculture, but it's like when they do this, the soil just, it soars, it vastly improves, and it's just incredible what people are able to accomplish with this in a short period of time too. And I even saw that they did this form of agroforestry, and their coffee beans or their cacao was like one of the highest grades in the world. So it just produces really high quality stuff because it is just doing so much good to the soil and the earth, eh?
I've got these really great examples around because I live on a small little orchard where I'm basically treating it as a research center where I'm experimenting, and I've got all these different things that I'm, trialing this and trialing that. And I've got all these different pockets of areas where it's great side by side comparisons of like, hey, this fruit tree is really sad because it's all on its own. Whereas this fruit tree, planted on the same day, from the same nursery, same kind of tree, planted in an agroforestry system, it's 3 times as big, it's way more beautiful, it's happier, and it's just outperforming the other one to the point where it's not even funny.
It's so fascinating. Hey, I think that we need to, like I said, I'm going to keep shouting it from the rooftops because that's literally like my whole direction of where I'm wanting to go, is just basically build things as big as possible so I can just direct more attention to this kind of stuff, right? Because I feel like our current systems of food production and farming and all that stuff is broken. And it's evident so in the fact that we've apparently got about 30 seasons or 30 harvests left, or 50 harvest. Like we've got, 30 to 55 or whatever years left of topsoil left, which is necessary for growing food to eat so we can live and survive. And I think that things like this and people like yourself that are at the grassroots level of like, it's like this organic rebellion, right? Even though we're not like rebelling against anything, we're just working with nature. But I feel like it's so crucial to be doing this kind of stuff, but yeah, just not enough people know about it. And I'm stoked because you've been blowing up recently on Instagram too. It's like, it's so good that this is actually getting out there,
It's a fun one, man. It's a fun place to be, knowing that everything is like aligned to this like higher purpose of like, yeah, just genuinely doing the best thing I can here, sharing it as much as possible. And like you say, it's still kind of, most people have either heard of food forests, but very few people have heard of or know the intricacies or the benefits of syntropic agroforestry. So it's a fun place to be in that space of like, hey, just sharing as I go. I'm not claiming to be an expert. I don't claim to have, a decade of experience under my belt, but hey, I'm a few years deep and I have some interesting, things I can share and some ideas. And so hopefully you can learn something from me.
100%. I learn something all the time. If you're listening to this, guys, then like you have to go like bring up his Instagram while you're doing this. It'll be in the show notes, but it's Byron. It's like just search for Byron from New Zealand and you'll see. And it's just like stunning what he's done. Is that your backyard, or are you like renting from someone, or like what's the situation?
Yeah, so basically I live on this small orchard with my parents. We moved here about 4-ish years ago and I love looking back at the old photos of when we first moved here, because 4 years doesn't sound like a lot, but in the span of like how quickly things can regenerate with syntropic agroforestry, man, I look back at those original photos and things just look so barren and just so lifeless almost. And the fun thing is I've still left patches like that because I'm still chipping away at converting the whole orchard. So now I've got these really great comparisons of like, hey, this is kind of what it was like when we first arrived. And then you turn 180 degrees and see what things can look like after just 2.5 years. And it's like you're in a South American jungle. So this is my backyard. I literally live in this little, what basically feels like a tree house surrounded by these forests. that I'm creating. And every single day things are growing, and every single day I walk down and I get to say hello to all the plants and I get to interact with things, and it's just this really good feeling.
It's awesome. It looks like you're in Bali or something like that from your photos.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like New Zealand.
Yeah, because is New Zealand like tropical or no? It's not. It's not even subtropical, is it?
It's a tricky one because New Zealand actually spans a really long. Now you're quizzing my knowledge. Longitude, I think, or latitude.
Yeah.
Latitude. Basically, it's really long north to south, and so the farthest south end of New Zealand is really really cold, compared to the farthest north end is really warm and subtropical. So you get a range. I'm on the north half of the North Island, so we do get to play with bananas and papayas and more subtropical fruits.
That's cool. Got it. That makes sense then, because yeah, I think when people think New Zealand, they think like Queenstown and snow, right, or Auckland and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's interesting. What got you into this in the first place? Like, I know you mentioned that you had a background in ecology type stuff, but like, what 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 were you doing before you were into this whole world, and then what got you into it? You know, I'm super curious about that change point for people.
It's an interesting one because it's not one that I saw coming at all before getting into even the permaculture side of things and the food forest side of stuff. I was just kind of your average, like, young 20-year-old male who was into like hiking and motorcycles and surfing and mountain biking and all the rest of it, which I still enjoy. But there was definitely that noticeable turning point where it clicked inside of me, and I was like, oh shit, I just want to dedicate my life to this. Just kind of dove in. And I think part of what it was is, like you said, I came from that background of ecology. I worked in a job where my job was really just to study and collect data on the ecological destruction that was happening. So I worked for the local government, and I was collecting data on the sedimentation of estuaries, and I was collecting data on the lakes and the groundwater pollution and all of that. I remember we would take groundwater samples at one of the local landfills, and the water would just come up like orange and gray and smelling like sewage, and it was just a devastating thing to be seeing on a regular daily basis. And so it felt so problem focused that I was like, yeah, this is good, it's what I went to school for, it's, it feels like I'm doing something all right, but it wasn't solution oriented. So as soon as I found out about permaculture, which I only kind of really found out about by once we moved here to this little orchard, I was like, okay, cool. I was Googling this stuff. I was like, how do you manage land in an ecologically responsible way? Which is like a clunky way of like asking the internet something, but it came back with, oh, have you tried permaculture? I was like, oh, what's that? I don't know what that is. Define permaculture. And I read the definition. There was this click. As soon as that happened, I read the definition of permaculture, and I was like, holy shit, that's what I want to do. And from that point, I just, as much research as I could, I signed up for some classes that were happening nearby me. And really, that was kind of the moment where everything shifted from like, okay, cool, now I have something really meaningful to dedicate my life to. And I think it was probably like less than a year and a half after that moment that I took the year-long course, did a bunch of other research and studies. I was able to quit my job and kind of become full-time, permaculture consulting and kind of just doing things in the land here.
It's so cool to see. How old are you, dude?
I'm 28.
28. Oh, sweet. Nice. Yeah. Bring it on, man. Yeah, I think we've got a new wave and revolution of, people like us that are interested in this stuff, that are seeing the problems that are at hand, that are passionate, that are also using social media. I think, like, this is something that I would like to become sexier quicker. I think it probably won't be as sexy until we hit more of a crisis point. But I think that people like yourself that are talking about it, sharing your journey and everything like that, and seeing the before and after, I think we're going to see a trend, especially as regenerative agriculture. It's like a buzzy now. It's like it's getting sexier, which is absolutely fantastic. I think, yeah, the more people that get into it, the more people that see what you're doing, they see the results, I think better, So I think it's just a matter of exposure and getting in front of people to make those kinds of changes. Because that's literally what happened to me. Is I have always been interested in the environment, like a lot of people, right? And I know a lot of people do things because of sustainability, but it's not until someone says something or something clicks that you actually decide to do something about it. But it's a even bigger step going from, oh, I'm going to eat regeneratively raised meat, or I'm going to eat organic, whatever, to actually like doing it yourself, you know, and making that your thing. Because I attempted to do the homestead thing a little while ago, and I was like, cool, I'm going to start growing stuff. I'm going to start growing food at home. And then I was like, this is not as romantic and sexy and easy as people make it seem on Instagram, right? Because, so like, what does it take from a mindset level to actually like start putting your attention into doing something like this and like seeing it through? Because that's something that I can only really speak from my experience, but I'm sure that there are a lot of people that are really intending to do something like this. I don't know, just curious to understand your mindset around all of it.
Yeah, so people want to do good things that make them feel good, right? People like doing the things that they know are good for the whole, right? Good for the planet, good for the environment, but they don't love to expend a bunch of extra work on something that doesn't directly benefit them. Which is part of why when and this is something that I kind of came across a lot before, was like when people are just yelling at you like, oh, don't use plastic bags and don't eat meat and don't do this and don't do that. It just gets kind of exhausting, and you're like, well, I kind of just want to do what I want to do. And especially on in the side of like ecosystem healing, like, oh, just go plant a bunch of trees. It's like, okay, but even still, that's not super compelling. I think the key is what you're saying is like making it sexy is like you got to make it compelling. And who doesn't want a food forest? Who doesn't want to live in a tropical or a temperate oasis of, there's always something ripe to eat on a tree. There's always some fresh fruit available every single day. That's a compelling thing. And if you can give people a vision of that and give people actionable steps to kind of make that happen and make it really enjoyable, and kind of like you're saying, is gardening is a lot of work. And I don't really consider what I do gardening. It's a little bit different. And the fun part is that it's really enjoyable, and I'm not out there every single day breaking my back. I'm not out. I don't feel like a slave to the land. I don't feel like burdened by what I'm doing. It's actually really enjoyable and nourishing because it's ticking off so many boxes. It's ticking off, yes, I'm doing things for the future, for myself in the future, that are going to be really fantastic. I'm doing things for the local ecology and the local landscape. I'm doing things for my mental health, being out in the forest, getting my hands in the soil. I'm doing things that build community. I'm doing things that other people can see and be inspired by and then go do it themselves. On all these different layers, it's just this really incredible feeling. And I think that beyond just one specific, here's why you should grow a food forest, there's all these different like benefits that come with it, benefits to you personally, to your family, to your local community, to the landscape, that once you kind of start seeing those and it kind of starts unlocking, you're like, I'm never going to stop this. I'm just going to dedicate myself and just dive in. And I've seen that happen to a number of people where they kind of catch the bug, and then the danger is their whole personality becomes, I grow a food forest.
It's not a bad personality to have. It's definitely better than a lot of other ones out there. But I can see that would be the case, And for me, this is one of my goals, is to just basically, I can't remember if I mentioned at the start of this but I want to build a Mr. Beast machine, right? Like he's got a huge machine, and then you see he does a lot of good stuff with it, like the Team Trees and Team Seas and his things. But it's like I want to do the same, but for this kind of thing, and I'm afraid of getting into it because I feel like I'll become obsessed. Because when I really get into something, and when you get, I wouldn't even really call it a dopamine hit when you're working with the land, because it's very different, right? Like I think it's a more authentic feeling. But I feel like once people get a taste for being on land that's being healed, that is being regenerated, it just does something into you. It hooks something into you. And I experienced this from being on my friend's land. She is building a syntropic forest here in Australia in the Lockyer Valley. And she had this land and it was dead and like dry and nothing was going on. And she started doing that. I went to one of her workshops, got to do the chop and drop and all those sorts of things, and it was awesome. And within just a year, like it's restored water back to the land. It's like it's growing things, and it's just the feeling of being there it's unlike any hit you'll get from video games or TikToks, right? Like it's just next level. I think what's a way that you think that we could get more people to like experience that and experience like the benefits of it? I don't really know how much of my audience is like out there and keen to do it, but like, yeah, what do you think is like a really great entry point for people to kind of like dive into this?
Well, I think what you've just pointed out in your own experience of who's around me that's doing this thing that I can come visit. I can get some hands-on experience with. I can join you for some chopping and dropping with a machete and seeing the actual process and having a hand in it. I don't think it takes being a landowner and doing every single thing yourself. It doesn't take that to get that feeling. What might actually happen is you go there, you do a little bit, and then you come away inspired. You go back next week and they say, hey, do you want to take some cuttings or do you want to take some of these? And you think, yeah, I could probably start a little bit of this at my own place. And I think that's how it happens. I think it's just from a really practical, just get out there. Hey, who is around in my area? There's a lot of this stuff happening in Australia, which is probably where a big part of your audience is. There's more and more popping up every single day here in New Zealand, in America. It's definitely something that's taking hold. And I think what you're right about those fish hooks that get in, it's just from seeing things in person. It's from doing things practically, hands in the ground.
It's very true. Yeah, you reflecting that. I think it's very true. It's one thing to see all these cool photos, but it's another thing to be there and experience it. I think I'm concerned for VR in that sense. You know, you can't really, you know, VR food forests and whatever. But the more we get to a crisis point, I think that the interest will change. And I think that the whole COVID thing that happened over the past couple of years, I think that was very positive for a lot of people because they just wanted to get out of the city, get away from all the chaos that was happening. A lot of people started homesteading, getting out to farms. I think it pushed a lot of people into this. But yeah, again, I feel like we need another bit of a movement. Yeah, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. What are you like? What are you growing at the moment, though? I'm really curious. Like, what are the kind of things that you are growing in your backyard paradise?
Oh, I have a whole list of things. I think I kind of go in waves of things that I'm excited about at a certain period of time. Because obviously there's a huge diversity when it comes to syntropic agroforestry, anything from quick, short succession annual vegetables to perennial vegetables, you know, medium term things, and then the long term stuff like pecans, walnuts, right? Things that live for a long time. I think one of the biggest things that I'm excited about is growing bananas for a few reasons. One of them is because I come from a pretty cold climate in the United States, and so to think that I can actually grow my own bananas and it's like it makes it feel like this tropical paradise. That's just exciting in its own right. Like anybody who comes from a colder climate kind of probably knows what I'm talking about of like, wow, that's really exciting. Similar with the sugar cane and all these really nice South American fruit trees. Those are some that like it's just really exciting. It's a fun process to watch and be a part of that. And so it's also not from like a feelings point of view, but from like a really practical point of view. Bananas are a really fantastic place to start with your agroforestry journey because they are those early succession species, right? Bananas produce really quickly. They create that microclimate. They create that shelter, that nursery for your longer term fruit trees, right? And that's kind of, I love that it kind of plays into both sides. It plays into like the side of things where it's like I want something quick to happen. I want something that's fun and observable, and like I want this noticeable change. Because when you see drone footage of my place, you know, most of what you see is like fruit trees and then a lot of bananas, and that's kind of what makes it feel really tropical. But then there's also the ecological side of it as well. And so bananas are a really fantastic one that I'm really excited about. There's so many different varieties here in New Zealand. It's not, you know, it's like still kind of early. I think, yeah, it's still early days in banana land here in New Zealand. It's not super established. There's not like a thriving industry here. And so it's really fun to be kind of spearheading that as well, you know, collecting different varieties and seeing what grows well and then kind of spreading those around. Yeah, I think it's a big staple in terms of like what gets me excited.
It's a good point. Hey, like I think that goes back to what we're talking about with the quick wins, but then it kickstarts that momentum too, right? Plus something you get to eat. And I know that a lot of like not everything is obviously edible in a food forest because this tree talks to this tree, and then those trees talk to another tree down the track, and they all like it basically becomes this community, this tribe of all these things interacting. But I know that there's all sorts of things that are working with the ecosystem. Is there like a model within what you do where there's like animals that come into play, or is it just specifically plants? Like I'm really curious about that too.
Yeah, there's definitely ways to incorporate animals into a food forest. It kind of takes like a lot more upfront design because sometimes people say, "Oh, I just want to let chickens loose in my food forest," and it's like, "Oh, that's probably not a fantastic idea because chickens scratch. They'll, you know, they're a lot more ecologically harmful, which is why in a chicken pen, right, you'll see that it's a lot of times bare soil, it's exposed, it's, you know, you're not creating a condition where that succession is going to easily be able to play out. But if you design it right, maybe you can have like alleyways in between your trees where you can do ducks, I've done pigs, you can do chickens. It just takes a little bit of thinking ahead of time. Or, so there's that option where it's like permanently animals incorporated into the system. Or you can kind of front run the system with animals, right? Maybe you say, cool, I want to do this whole patch in my backyard or this whole paddock in a food forest next year. We'll just do animals here this year, bring a lot of that fertilizer in, keep the vegetation under control. Boom. Once they're out, then the food forest goes in.
Got it. Makes sense. Yeah, because it's a very different way of like building things to obviously, you know, like ruminant animals or those sorts of things. And so it's just kind of curious, but it makes sense. You wouldn't want a chicken just ruining everything after you've put a lot of hard work into it.
Yeah.
What's your philosophy like on food as well? What's your kind of diet look like? What are you into? What do you eat?
Yeah, I eat so much fresh fruit that it's ridiculous. Obviously, living in a food forest, I don't even want to calculate how expensive my diet would be if I had to buy all the fruit that I'm eating. So big fruit person, and then a lot of vegetables and a lot of eggs, some meat. It feels right for me. My body reacts really well to it. I have the right amount of energy. I also don't eat until around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So kind of doing that window.
Right. And so you eat for a couple of hours within that and then you're done?
Yeah, usually from like 3 o'clock until 8, so maybe a 4 or 5 hour window.
Ah, nice. And you that really works for you, eh? Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. That's cool. Yeah, I'm always interested in people's food philosophies and their connection to food, because obviously we all have our own journeys. Myself, I've obviously had like health problems and those sorts of things. Have you ever had stuff like that, or you got you got lucky?
I got lucky. I've been super healthy and really able to eat pretty much whatever I want. Not picky at all. Anything pretty, reacts pretty well for me.
That's awesome. That's good. You got the good genes, so you can go off and do that good work, and I got the health problems, so I could help people with the health problems.
There you go.
We've all got our own challenges and battles and stuff. That's for sure. I love that you're doing a lot of like stoic and a lot of personal growth and all sorts of things like that within what you're doing in your content. It's not just like check out my food forest. Like you're sharing a lot of growth and mindset stuff. Like I'd love to hear about your kind of philosophies around all that as well, because it's really I'm really enjoying that content myself that you're sharing.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Rory. And I think one thing that you just said actually really highlights how that plays into anybody's life. You said something about how because you were faced with some of these health problems, that's your opportunity to then give back to the community, that then there's your opportunity to kind of share and give value. And it's that saying of the obstacle is the way, right? Rather than just seeing that health problem, I was like, oh man, that's going to like wreck my life. That's going to be a huge burden. It's like, no, that's the way that I should be going, because that's where the glory is. That's where freedom is. And that's where I can give back, right? Be a positive force in the world.
That's good. I'm going to clip that, bro. That's so good. It's so true. I think if we all knew that, we'd probably lean into the challenges and obstacles, right? Because there's so much gold on the other side. Is just leaning into what is there, finding that silver lining. Because, that's profound, bro.
Well, that's why I do the cold showers, because it sucks. That's why I do martial arts, because it sucks to get choked out by big sweaty men. That's why I face these things that inherently I might feel some resistance to, even in my relationships. Family relationships, like these situations when your skin gets like, ooh, that's uncomfortable, I don't want to go there. That's the signal, like, no, I should go there. That's where I should go. That's where I'm going to find freedom, is voluntarily facing that challenge.
That's definitely something I need to do more myself. It's very easy to get comfortable. You find, especially when you're dealing with health and the healing journey, it's like, cool, you get comfortable here and you don't want to bring anything new in or challenge that because you're comfortable and it's safe. It's safe, right? But then when you move out of that safety zone and find a bigger bucket to get safe in, right? I think that's just what it is, right? Is just like constantly expanding our capacity to just live and experience life.
Yeah. And I love the imagery that you're using as well. The way you're describing it, even verbally, you're talking about bigger buckets, right? And it fits this idea. There's a diagram that I've seen before on the internet where it's talking about grief, right? You've lost a loved one or a parent, and the grief doesn't shrink over time. Your capacity grows. So it's not like a sphere that shrinks down. It's, maybe at the start, that sphere is taking up as much of your capacity as possible. But in another 5 years, It's not that the grief has shrunk. You've expanded your own capacity to manage that grief. And I think it's the same with challenges, right? You expand your capacity. The things that were challenging for you 6 months ago, after applying yourself and facing those dragons and actually tackling things head on, it's not that the problems have decreased, they're diminished. Your capacity has grown.
It's true. That's what we need to focus on. I'm doing a lot of like nervous system work at the moment and learning about that, and that's really fascinating and new to me. And I'm just seeing how, perhaps potentially at the root level, some of my health issues have come from a dysregulated nervous system and the capacity to hold things. And I think, instead of focusing on whatever, you just focus on building that capacity to be able to handle things, because life's going to throw stuff off us. And if anything, the last couple of years has taught us is that anything can come around, right? And just, so I think building that up and, doing practices, doing things like what you're doing, cold showers, even throwing yourself. I'm curious about, Brazilian jiu-jitsu as well. That's something that I would never gravitate towards myself, because it's just not really a thing that I would do. But now it's like, okay, that would feel really uncomfortable and like interesting to me. What would I gain from putting myself in a situation like that?
You gain that confidence of knowing that you can handle yourself in a situation that's uncomfortable, right? Even if it doesn't mean like, oh, I'm prepared for a street fight. It's like, no, but I have the ability to put myself willingly into uncomfortable situations and manage that and grow because of it.
And I saw somewhere that you posted you've been in cold showers for like 6 months or something like that.
Yeah.
You don't even do it warm to start with. You just go cold straight.
Here's the trick. I don't actually have the option to do it warm. I'm literally just tapped in right to the pipes. And so, it's not even a question of like, am I going to start it warm? It's just cold the whole way. And I've recently, in the last couple of weeks, actually found the best way is starting it with your head right under and then just turning it on, blasting it onto your head. Don't even like sneak into it. Just like, face the dragon, face the uncomfortableness, choose that suffering, and then it gets easier.
Great philosophy. It's very true. I'm about to start doing like a lot of biohacking tests. I guess a cold shower would be considered that, even though it's just a cold shower and people just do it around the world anyway. Yeah. But it's something that I'm really curious in as well, to see what happens. Do you do ice baths and stuff as well?
I haven't taken it to that level, but I'm super keen.
That looks fun. I see that and I'm like, I like crave that in my body. And I love jumping into, I've been to New Zealand a couple times, and the most recent time was probably about 4 years ago. And it was in winter, just jumping into a freezing cold below 7 degrees lake. It's just the most incredible, feeling. You feel alive, right?
Well, I just shared a video the other day where it's comparing the use of cocaine to the dopamine that your body produces when you're in a cold shower or a cold water situation. Same levels of dopamine, right? It's like a 250 times increase in the dopamine level. The difference is that with cocaine, spikes and then crash, whereas with the cold water stimulus, it slowly over the course of hours builds that dopamine up. So basically, no wonder you're feeling like a high on life when you're jumping into cold lakes. You just feel alive and energized, and you feel this natural like rush of endorphins and dopamine.
That's interesting. The comparison between the two, I wouldn't think so. Sounds a lot healthier and cheaper, that's for sure.
That's exactly what I said in the video. I was like, hey, if you need that rush, just take some cold showers.
Fully, man. It's definitely a rush. Is this stuff that you were into like growing up as a teenager, or was this in your world with your parents exposed to as well, or is this kind of just a thing that you've discovered through your own over the past few years?
It's definitely not something that my parents kind of brought up around me, other than the philosophy of like, just try it, right? They definitely encourage that of like, if you're scared, that's okay to be scared. Do it scared, just try it, and then you can confirm, yeah, I do like that, no, I don't like that. But in terms of like, biohacking stuff, or, whatever you want to call it, and like really pushing your boundaries, that wasn't a huge emphasis. I think I've always kind of been driven towards that direction. Even when I was, younger and like in high school, I was reading and I was watching videos to see how can I make myself better? How can I improve myself, right? But only in the last handful of years, and especially ramping up in the last like almost 10 months, I've really like kind of made a decision to dedicate myself to like, hey, you're only young once, you're only in your late 20s once. How far can I push myself? How much can I grow? How much can I expand what my life is like?
I love that. I came on, I didn't even expect to talk about this stuff. I was like, oh yeah, let's talk about the food forest. Now we're like geeking out on this stuff. And I think that this is, I think this is the kind of stuff that allows you to do all the other things in life, right? Like this is the base level fundamental stuff that I feel like is incredibly important. And yeah, so I love that.
Well, and we can take it back to the food forest stuff, man, because this is something that we were speaking on before of like, I was joking about like making your whole personality about food forests. And I'm joking about that because that's kind of how it felt like I was showing up online for a while, right? I was only really sharing about food forest stuff, and this is what the food forest looks like today, and this is some tips. And for a few reasons, I kind of recognized that in myself, and for the reasons I think is because I felt like it was a business thing for me. I was like, oh, but I need to make sure business is doing all right. So I need to, make sure that's the content that people are interested in and want to see. And maybe they don't want to see these other things. But I kind of started to realize, this is the journey that I'm going on. It pays to be authentic on social media. And if people don't fuck with me for whatever direction this part of my life is going in, that's fine, right? Because there's going to be more people who are attracted to that side of me. And the data is showing that, right? The audience growth that you've noticed, that's not just because I'm just continuing to grind on the food forest stuff. It's like, actually, no, it's because I'm sharing more of my personality authentically online and showing up more as, instead of just being the food forest guy, which is kind of what I was seeing myself becoming. Now it's like, okay, cool, but he does food forests, he does like stoicism philosophy, he does martial arts, he's talking about all these other things. And I think that's giving people more opportunity to kind of grab on and see like, oh yeah, I connect with him here, and oh, what's he doing with the food forest stuff? Oh, that's interesting. Versus if you were just the food forest person, then for somebody to like be interested, it's like they have to be interested in the food forest stuff. Otherwise, you can have all the personal philosophies and growth stuff in the world, but if you're not putting that out there for people to latch onto and then connect to the food forest stuff, you're missing out on a huge way of connecting people and impacting the awareness. Like we're talking full circle of like, bring more awareness to food forestry through discipline, through martial arts, through personal growth, through whatever avenues you're also interested in.
I don't know if you watch much YouTube, but I've been seeing these videos of this guy called Dan Coe quite a lot recently. Have you seen him pop up?
No, I haven't.
Okay. He talks about like the one person business, right? And he talks about you are the niche. And so much of us get caught up in having a niche and sticking to it because that's what we're told. That's what the world of marketing and business and content creation is. But he's like, no, screw that. You are the niche. Share all the things because we all follow like a couple hundred people, right? Like I don't just follow carnivore people. In fact, most of the content I consume is not even in my niche at all. And, so everyone else is following all sorts of people. So if you're sharing all these things that you're into, then there's a good chance that there's a whole bunch of people love all those things too. And I think that's probably like exactly what you shared. And this is something that I've been a bit nervous to lean into as well, because this is, it's about this much of what I'm actually into is the food and that sort of stuff. There's so many other things, but when you're kind of in a niche and things are going well, it can be a little, I'm speaking from where I'm currently at. It's like, it's a little scary to take that, like, what if people stop following? What if people are not interested? What if I can't make an impact because, the people that are only interested in gut health, what if they're not interested in my philosophy? But it's like, you find your tribe, you find your people, and you just reach more. And I love that that's what's been working for you. And since you've been doing that, I've been diving deeper into your world now as well.
And it's a scary thing for a real reason. It's not just like in your head. It can be very real, like whether it's business impacts or, finances or just the audience shrinking. That's something that happened to me when I started branching out, right? People knew me as just the food forest person in New Zealand. And as soon as I started sharing more about, Stoic philosophy and some on masculinity, immediately there was a whole swath of people who were like, hey, that's not what we're into. We're leaving because we're only interested in this part of what you talk about. It's like, okay. And to be honest, it feels better. Like, sure, there was a decrease in the audience, there was a decrease in the business because of that. But the upside is now people can connect with me more authentically, the people who are actually interested in a little bit more holistically who I am, rather than just seeing me as, this is who you are, you're just a two-dimensional food forest person. I don't want any of your other philosophies.
Totally. It's true. I've lost probably like 5, probably almost 6,000 on Instagram recently. But then I forget, no, well, you gained like 160. So it's not really. And even then it's like, you're better off having more people that are there for you rather than people that are just there for a gimmick or whatever. You want to be surrounded by the right kinds of people. And I'm totally with that. I think that can apply very well to life as well, right? Like, you don't want to, like, I've always had multiple different friend groups all throughout the years. Some people that are interested in this, some that are interested in this, and it's felt very compartmentalized. But then, and you don't show your true self, but when you start to show your true self, that's when the freedom comes. And yeah, like, that's that phase that I'm in, and it's very refreshing to see you doing that. What was the piece of content that started to blow up, that just started to take off? Like, you did something and then all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, let's go. Like, what was that again?
That was a philosophy piece of content from Alan Watts, and in summary, basically, it was saying that you need to live life playfully, right? And it didn't say this word for word, but the idea is that life is like jazz. The world is like jazz. It's not meant to be hurried up and get to the end. It's meant to be enjoyed, right? Even if you're at work, even if you're in a situation that's not terribly pleasing, you can still find room to be playful. You can still find room to enjoy the day, enjoy the sunlight, and in essence, life is meant to be enjoyed.
It's profound. And that's the thing. That's exactly what you were talking about, is you share that side of things. And then it's just, you were like, oh, okay, this is really like impactful. This is interesting, man.
It connects with people more than this is how you do the food forest stuff. And I'm going to keep doing that because that's really valuable for people, but that's not, I was having a conversation earlier today with a buddy of mine who's basically saying like, hey, I want to bring more value to my audience. How are you doing that? And it's that balance between depth and width, right? I can go really deep on the food forest stuff. I can go into the technical stuff. We can go into the soil biology. We can go into pruning techniques and chop and drop and management and species. But we can also go really wide and talk about, hey, this actually brings a lot of value to your mental health, and bring more awareness into food forest from that avenue, or just looking at the Stoicism side of things and personal growth and philosophy, and then funnel you into the food forest side of things for people who haven't heard of it. But it's hard for people to connect if you're only going really deep on things. So casting a wide net, but also going to depth.
I was chatting to someone just before and about social media and stuff like that. It's like, you just got to make people care first about something, right? Like, it's like the hook or whatever term. I hate that. But, like, finding a way to meet people where they're at with what they care about, and then, funneling them into that. And I guess, like, that's your, you have clients and people that you work with that come through that as well. So there'll be that small percentage that kind of like, oh yeah, cool, I need this, right? Like, there's that side. Is that like what you do outside of creating that? Like, you actually consult people on how to create these? Like, do you do Zoom calls? Like, what does that whole kind of business side of what you do look like?
Yep, everything from in-person events where people can come here. We can do hands-on how to design a food forest from scratch. I've got one coming up in the next couple weeks, all the way over to the fully remote side of things, where it's like, hey, if you want direct, like, specific help for you and your food forest journey, we'll jump on Zoom, we'll look at maps, we'll draw things, and kind of everything in between, in-person consulting, installations, helping people out. Really, I'm in the business of, kind of helping people get to their goals. And usually that has to do with food forestry stuff. Sometimes it's about, hey, I'm approaching these problems in my life. Hey, I need some help with this kind of mindset stuff. And, I feel like we'd be good to just, have some chats and kind of get through that. Sweet too. But most of what I do is really food forest consulting, installation work, education.
Amazing. I really hope to see your work go like as far as possible, because it's great not only what you're doing with the soil and the land, but also your philosophies. And I think that combination, I just think, is an absolute winner. And yeah, I'd love to fly you over here one day or do something, because my goal is to, I think I'll probably move into like having a ranch or something like that first, because I'm really big on animal-based eating because of how impactful it's been on my health. And so I want to have like that regenerative ranch side. But if I had all the millions and billions in the world, I would literally just buy up land. That's what I do, and just build Syntropic, or like little mini ranches or regenerative stuff. And so I'd love, in whatever way, whenever I've got those things, maybe I should jump into the tech space or something. But like, I'd love to just really be more involved with what you're doing and have more people be involved in it. I just see so much good coming from it, eh?
And I have no doubt that's going to happen, partly because of this reason, Rory. I'm going to be doing this for the next 30 years of my life. So, considering that I'm only like barely 3-4-ish years into things, 2 years into taking it really seriously, I've got decades to go. And so I have no doubt that things are going to keep expanding. The ripple effect of things, we're going to connect. I'm going to see you in Australia. I'm going to see you out here. I'm going to be, continuing to spread this message of, hey, you can get after your food forest. You can get after improving your life. This is just the beginning.
That sounds good. We'll have to do some sort of 6 series in person. I'd love to do that. Whether you come here or I come there in the future, I'm definitely down for that. So you really feel like you're here, you've got your roots planted, and you're just going to keep growing and flourishing and expanding in this space and beyond, eh?
Yeah, 100%, Rory, because I don't think that people ask me like, "Oh, what's your dream for the land?" And it's like, well, my dream isn't about this land specifically. My dream is about showcasing what's possible and sharing that with people. And this land is a vehicle to do that right now. But ultimately, the greatest potential that I have in my life isn't this land and growing a bunch of fruit. The greatest potential I have is activating other people, right? Speaking to other people and sharing that inspiration and that enthusiasm. That's something that I have a lot of to give, is enthusiasm for this stuff. And it's infectious. It rubs off on people. And so if I can infect a bunch of other people with food forest or enthusiasm about improving their life, they can go on to do the same. And so I think that paired with my patience, knowing that I'm going to be doing this for another 1, 2, 3 decades, that longevity, there's no way that I'm not going to continue to, expand things and improve what I consider to be a really important part of the world is the landscapes and the people side of things.
Love that, man. It's been so cool connecting with you. It's just one of beginning. We'll have to like see where things are in a period of time, and just be really curious. It'd be really cool. Maybe do something in a forest one day, like do an interview or something. That would be nice with like things chirping or bugs in the background.
That'd be fantastic. And have you ever done much? Have you done much traveling to South America?
Once I went to Brazil to Floripa Uribici. I did like a men's retreat thing, and it was very powerful. And the land was just like incredible. It was like 600 acres of, I think it's like classified as the coldest part of Brazil, but it was 600 acres of like national forest, and so I really connected with the land and everything. So I've got, it's in my heart now, but I haven't done much. That was like 10 days worth. So you spent a bit of time there as well?
No, I haven't, but I'm planning a trip, and because there's a lot of syntropic agroforestry happening in Brazil, and so I'm going to go there. I'm going to learn, sponge as much up as I can. So maybe someday we'll connect. Whether it's in Australia, New Zealand, maybe we'll go to Brazil.
Hey, that's cool. I'm all for putting some cool things out there for real. Like I'm with you. It's like you really got to use what's currently there to launch into expand, like into not necessarily bigger things, but we just don't know where any of this is going to take us, So that would be really cool, man. And can you tell people what you've got going on now? Like, how can people find you? How can they work with you?
It's really easy to find me. Like you said, just type my name into Instagram, Byron in New Zealand. I make YouTube videos, do a lot of Instagram content. If you want to work with me, I've got a website. Just reach out on Instagram, though, if you like what I've got going on. And that's pretty much it. I do events every now and then, but mostly just here to give people value, have people enjoy the content.
Sweet. I'm enjoying it, dude. Very much enjoying it. The last thing I forgot to ask this is, I'll put this in somewhere in there. What made you decide to actually start documenting and posting about this stuff? Because, that's a specific thought process. Not everyone, there's a whole bunch of people out there that are doing it that never post a thing about it. Like, what made you decide to start sharing your journey?
There's a few distinct events that made me start sharing. One is that even before I was posting anything to Instagram, I loved making videos. Even when I was a young kid, I loved making videos, and I would never upload them anywhere because I didn't really, I just didn't have that in me, but I didn't have the confidence, I should say. But so I loved making videos. And then once I moved from America to New Zealand, I was like, holy shit, I have to start over. I don't know anybody here. I don't have any friends. I know nobody. I need to like find some people that are into what I'm into. And so that's kind of when I started to post a little bit more regularly and take a little bit more seriously sharing content on Instagram. But that wasn't food forest content. That was just, hey, I just moved to this country. I like adventuring. I like motorcycles. I like surfing. I like mountain biking, hiking, all these different things. And that was my first taste of, holy shit, this is how you build a community. And that was in 2018. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm connecting with people who are into what I'm into. And then I kind of in the background knew, I was like, okay, this is how one would go about building a business. Not that I was inclined that way at all. I wasn't business oriented ever in my life. But I was listening to people like Gary Vee, and I was understanding that, yeah, this is how you grab attention. This is how you create community. And at the moment, I'm just using that to build connections and do cool, go on fun experiences with people. But once I kind of fell down that rabbit hole of, oh, hey, food forests are really cool. Permaculture is interesting. It was kind of just a natural progression of like, hey, look, in these 2 years, I've been interested in like outdoor ventures, but hey, now I'm taking these courses and now I'm learning this stuff and I'm applying it to the land in this way. And then there's a whole new subset of people who were not only interested in the adventure stuff, but now it's like, cool, hey, we're on that same journey. We'll follow you and see what's going on. Hey, we're on that same journey. Oh, that's interesting. Here's what I'm doing. Oh, here's what you're doing. And then it's just kind of morphed into, hey, now there's a bunch of people who are interested in food forests and the people who have been here for the longest time. I got a message the other day from like, hey, I've been following you since you moved to New Zealand. I'm like, holy shit, you've seen so much growth and development in the last 5 years.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah, because I'm in this world of creation, it's my world, it's my job, it's my biz. I'm always so fascinating on what makes people decide to start sharing. And that's so cool. And it's so true where this is probably the best way to create community and connections. And, the people that I've met through doing this, like yourself included, and like, I'm just meeting so many cool people and building community. And, obviously there's the business side, which is fantastic, but it's powerful. So I'm glad you decided to create and keep going. And yeah, if anyone wants to do it and has been wanting to just, if you've been wanting to do what he's doing with the food forest stuff, with Syntropic, get into regenerative agriculture, any of his philosophies, Stoics, like literally any of it, just use this as an excuse, a permission slip to just do it, and then, just you'll find your people through it as well. Like we're all out there,
When you first started, did you hate the sound of your voice? I'm not saying that because I hate the sound of your voice. I'm asking you.
What are you saying? I actually had a bunch of people. I was featured on a podcast recently with Sean Baker, and a bunch of people made comments about my inflections and the way I rise up at the end of when I talk or the way I speak and whatever. And it made me a little self-conscious, to be honest. But apart from that, like, I think years ago, like if I look back at who I was 10 years ago, I cringe. But I've always loved the camera. When I was 10 years old, I vlogged for the first time, right? And it was cool. That's the earliest footage I have on me. So I've always loved performing, being in front of camera. But there are times throughout my life that I look back on, I'm like, make sure all of these videos are privated, because it wasn't so much about my voice, but it was like who I was back then isn't an accurate reflection of me, and I wasn't comfortable in myself, I think. But yeah, my voice is cool. I'm going to hire a voice coach at some stage, probably, just to, who knows, just maybe I can be more impactful. I don't know. But yeah, I'd say no, except for those comments recently that just...
Just got under the skin.
Yeah, it's funny, right? So the comments don't normally get to me, but I've had a couple this morning that were just like, all right, let's yeah. What about you?
Comments don't really get to me because I know myself, but in terms of hearing old recordings of myself, I remember cringing like, oh, I don't want to listen to myself. I don't like listening to the sound of my voice. You produce enough, you just get over it so quickly. It doesn't even, it doesn't even faze you.
Fully, yeah. And people figure it out, or they don't. And we have so many perceptions about our stuff that other people don't have and honestly don't care about, like when certain people are concerned about their weight or the way they look or sound or certain things about them, and you see them, you're like, I literally don't care about any of that. I love you for who you are, and those things are zero significance to me. So it's usually in our heads.
Yeah. And even if somebody does have an obnoxious voice, not everyone is going to think it's obnoxious. Some people, sure, they're not going to listen because of that, but a whole group of people would be happy to listen to what you have to say, despite a voice that not everybody would find appealing. So
It's true. And, and if it's gimmicky, make a gimmick out of it, run all the way to the bank, I say. But
well, the obstacle is the way, face that fear, acknowledge, yep, I have a shitty voice, but I'm going to keep on recording videos.
what's your message to the world?
I want to encourage people to just be the best version of themselves, whatever form that takes on, whether that means, like we were talking about before, just applying more discipline into certain parts of your life, or whether it's about showing up more authentically so you can make deeper connections, or tackling things head on, right? If you're burdened by the problems of the world and the problems of your life, is there a way in which you can kind of, rather than running away from those, face them directly head on and become a better person through that? And it doesn't have a lot to do with the food forest stuff in particular, because that's a detail that not everybody can apply to. But if you can make your life better, whether it's food forests, interpersonal relationships, your own discipline levels, and how comfortable you feel in your skin and in your life, that's a huge win.
Dude, this has been so awesome to connect and chat, and I hope everyone's got, no doubt everyone's got a lot of value out of it. And I look forward to connecting more soon. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, Rory. It's been great. Love the conversation, and I'm excited to connect again, whether it's on here, in person, in a forest. We'll make it happen.
Sounds good. You know what? You're a legend. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode or watch it if you're on YouTube. It means the world to me. And there's plenty more where this came from as well. So if you'd like to see more content or listen to more podcast content, then you can just hit subscribe on YouTube. If you're on Spotify or iTunes or the other things, 5-star rating goes a very, very long way and would be forever grateful. For any of the resources and links mentioned, you can head over to rorybland.com, and you can check out my exclusive newsletter at rorybland.com/newsletter. Thank you again, and I can't wait for you to check out the next one.